gonna,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm Vanna White, so you just tell me what to do.
Tim, you gotta be.
So Tim is retired, he's the one wearing the t-shirt. I'm still the employee professional and wearing the collared button down. Tim Wilhelm, go ahead and. So the standard kit that we're familiar with, two humbuckers, one three-way switch, a volume and tone, both of those are audio tapered 5K. Typically 122 microfarad tap or 47, an input jack and a fuse and a holder. Next please. So one of the things about the three-way switch, it's neck, both, bridge. And a blend pot has two linear taper tensiometers ganged together on a single shaft. And they are matched with that linear taper. There's typically a center detent, which means when you find the center, it kind of just drops into there. And it's wired opposite, and we'll show you that. This is smaller than the three-way switch, which means you have to plan on doing it. Or you have to figure out how to do the whole. Next, please. You want to talk about this?
Well,
this is electronics. He's the electronics guy.
This is just illustrating that in a lot of electronics applications, not just guitars, they can set up a potentiometer or a variable resistor to have either a linear taper or an audio taper. Because our ears do not hear linearly, we perceive the sound differently than the actual linear deployment of it. So this just shows you what a linear taper would be like versus an audio taper, which is logarithmic. For this particular application, the board's blend pot that Bill picked uses two linear taper pots. And what this shows is this is the red is one pot, the blue is the other pot. At the center detent, they're both playing about the same volume, but as you move past center this way, the volume of one drops way off while the volume of the other stays up. So you get a blend of those two. So at the far end of the sweep, let's say, I don't know which is neck and which is bridge, but let's say the blue is the neck, or let's use blue for bridge, blah, blah, blah. So the blue would be the bridge. When it's wound all the way this way, you're hearing completely the bridge pickup and nothing from the neck pickup. And you gradually build back up to where they're both the same volume, and then you go to the other end of the sweep, and it's all neck pickup and no bridge pickup. It's kind of a nice addition and not that difficult to wire up. And like Bill says, it's a smaller footprint inside the pocket. So you get more variation of sound.
So, doing the demo, you're the guitar player. I'm a drummer, so I'm not really allowed. And that's the lid.
That's the lid right there. Let's get the tone a little more right. Okay, right there is the center detent. And as I go all the way toward the one end, I get more brightness, and I think that's the bridge pickup. And you can hear blend all the way up to the full neck pickup. If I go slow, you get that variation instead of just clunk clunk. That's the center point. Both are playing equal volume. And then I gradually go to more brightness on the other end. So I think that's kind of cool. A nice substitute for that three-way switch.
Is that something, I'm sorry, is that something you made or invented, or is that?
No, you can buy it.
No, you can just buy all parts, $10 for the blend pot. And they're available elsewhere. Now, one thing to note about these humbuckers, this is a set of Stumac, Parsons Street, Golden Age humbuckers. And so this is an Alnico 2 neck and an Alnico 5 bridge. So the humbuckers are actually chosen to be quite different and to have different tone quality in the first place. So you can mix and match those. This still works with just standard humbuckers, whether they're standard, neck bridge, overwound, whatever. You still get the blend and all that. This just kind of accentuates it even a little more. Next one, please. So with the tone pot all the way up to 10, which is roaring all the way to there. Wait a minute. This is electronics. I'm talking.
Okay.
I apologize.
Here we go. The tone pot is a variable resistor. At one end where you're set to 10, you're at maximum resistance. At the other end, set to 0, you're at minimum resistance. And I'm going to have to ask you to recall the visual picture in your mind's eye of the schematic of the tone circuit. But basically what happens is there's a signal wire going all the way straight across eventually to the volume control and then to the tip of the output. Parallel to that, branching off, there is that variable tone pot and then a capacitor that goes to ground. Now when the tone pot is all the way to 10 maximum resistance, the signal's coming down the line toward the output and it sees this branch and says, no, that's high resistance, and it keeps on going. The full signal of the string keeps on going to the output jack. But as you turn the tone pot down to 0 and the signal's coming down and it sees that branch off at that intersection, it says, whoa, maybe I could send something down here. And when you have it all the way down to 0, the resistor's gone and the only thing left there is the capacitor. And the interesting thing about capacitors, if you recall the schematic symbol for a capacitor, it's basically a curved line and a straight line with a gap in between the two wires. What is that? That's an open circuit. How much current goes through an open circuit with direct current? Absolutely none. No current goes through it. In fact, with alternating current, current doesn't go through it. It just appears to go through it. So if you remember that a capacitor is an open circuit, nothing flows at 0 hertz. That helps you remember at low frequencies, it tends to block low frequencies, but it apparently allows high frequencies to pass. And the way it works is the higher the frequency and the larger the capacity value, the more high frequency band it captures and allows to apparently pass through. So now with that tone pot turned down to 0 resistance and the capacitor fully engaged, the signal's coming down and it sees that branch off, and the low frequencies say, no, that's too much work for me, I'm following the path of least resistance. Low frequencies all head toward the output, but the high frequencies say, no, this is path of least resistance, and the high frequencies dump to ground. And that's why when you turn that down to 0, you get the more warm, mellow tone. Let me turn this back up to 10, and it's bright, and as I turn it back down to 0, oh, is that the right one? Or is it, no, that was the one. This is the tone. Turn it back, now you hear how mellow, and then you hear how bright. Now what's going on is, when you pluck a string, you have a tonic note. But in addition to that, you've got the harmonics. And I don't remember the exact frequency of the high E, 320 or something. 330, okay, so you're gonna have harmonics at 660 and at 990 and all the way up like that. And all of those higher frequencies that are coming off of this string are what give it the brightness. The high-end harmonics are giving it that brightness. But when I turn it down to 0 like this, here's all the high-end harmonics. And I turn it down, and the high-end harmonics have just dumped to ground, and I have the tonic note and maybe a couple more harmonics that are lower frequency remaining. So that's effectively how it works. That was probably way too long of an explanation.
Well, and so
better explanations of how it works.
yeah. So to summarize, with the tone pot all the way down to 0, minimum resistance, it allows the cap to engage the signal from the pickup and shunts the higher frequency harmonics to ground. They don't appear on the output. So, next one. The higher frequency harmonics give the sound a bright and tinny tone. higher frequency harmonics missing, the sound is warmer and mellower. A 22 microfarad, or what we would use for like a standard Strat sound, it gives a brighter tonal canvas, which I made up that, but I hope you understand what that means, than using a larger capacitance. And so that's why Strats sound a little bit different than Les Pauls if you're just looking at how they kind of sound. Next one.
I don't know if you can see.
Can we
this
turn
very
out the
well.
lights here? And I think we can see this a little bit better.
What I did was a couple of screen captures with the oscilloscope app that you showed us, Tom. And the amplitude's a little different, but don't pay attention to the amplitude. Pay attention to the shape of the waveform. What you've got here is a real sharp peak right here and another smaller peak right there, rather than just a pure sine wave. Those two peaks are from the higher frequency harmonics. So this would be tone pot set to max resistance, the whole signal is bypassing the tone circuit and the whole signal is going to the output. But when you turn that tone pot down to 0, it starts stripping off the higher frequencies. So see that one there compared to that right there, and see that thing right there, which doesn't even exist anymore right there. Now it's kind of hard to tell because when you pack multiple frequencies and multiple amplitudes into one signal, you get an odd looking waveform. And now we get into STEM stuff, and you start talking about Fourier transforms, and if you hit the next slide, please. A frequency analyzer does sort of a Fourier transform for you. And so this is the first one, and this is the main frequency right here. And you can see all these harmonics showing up. I up-tuned this to 350, so I got 350, 700, 1050, and so on down the line. And even had a pretty high spike way out in this high harmonic out here. Turn the tone pot down to 0, high frequencies dump to ground, and look, the high frequencies down here are gone, or they're smaller. This one, which was huge, is now way down to this. And that's why all that tinniness and brightness has gone away. Next slide, please. Here you go.
So, as a guitarist, you know, you want to have all the tones. So instead of just having the 22 or the 47, click, please, ding, and you can get a 5 or 6 position rotary switch. You do your fine adjustment, that 0 to 10 or in the middle with a standard tone pot. But more importantly for a guitarist, you now can have a chicken head knob. And I will say a little bit about this guitar style. This is what called a Lucy. It's from Lucille, the ES345 variant. My criteria for designing this guitar: semi-hollow body, F-hole, chicken head knob. I didn't know what the chicken head knob was for, but I wanted one. So this is what you can do as a designer, is just go for it. So then I looked and saw what this rotary switch was, and what we have is just 6 caps in there, a little bit of heat shrink. Next slide, please. And we're coming in here. You need a good soldering station because you're going to be doing some small soldering. Third hand is nice. Locking forceps, the smaller one, needle nose pliers and wire cutters. Sean, we're good to go. The capacitor values are 10, 15, 22, 33, 47, and 68. And so the way this works, they're wired up to that's 10, 15, 22, right down the middle, 33, which is splits the difference. There's your Les Paul sound, and then there's 68. And so a 68 would be something you would use in like a bass, and right there in the middle is kind of your standard Strat. So if you'll do that, here's the Bodie plot. I know that now. I will let Tim tell you what.
Well, and what I did was I took a online bone plotter and I stuck in different capacitor values, and I made individual plots of what's called the cutoff frequency for each of those different capacitors. And then I used that little paint bucket tool and I changed the colors of all the lines, and I used Inkscape to blend them all together and superimpose them. And so you can see all the way from the 10 microfarad out to the 68 microfarad. Now cutoff is considered 3 dB below your main signal. So somewhere right about in here is the cutoff. And you can see that the 10, it doesn't cut off till you get way out here. This is logarithmic. So these frequencies are really far out. And then you go up to the 15, it cuts off a little lower frequency, and on down to the 22 and the 33 and the 47 and the 68. The 68 starts cutting off frequencies way down here, which I think is below about 100 hertz. Yeah, so it starts, oh yeah, there's a number right here, duh, right by my finger. Yeah, so it starts cutting off pretty quickly. And that's why the 68 has even more of a mellow tone than does the 10, because the 68's cutting off everything between there and there as well. So that kind of shows you all the possibilities.
So a little bit about the build. This is the 6-position switch here. What I like to do is lay out the 6, and these are just the little greenies. You can buy them in packs of 100. Very affordable. Small piece of heat shrink tubing, and what you do is you pull the heat shrink tubing, clamp it up there, and your forceps then become the heat sink, so that when you solder it, you don't start shrinking the heat shrink. But now this is going to, in effect, sleeve that wire. Next one, please. And so there's another one. We've got a little hook here. The nice about the third hand, it's holding this in position, and you can actually do this with the third hand and the forceps that kind of tripod together, and you can put that little hook in here and solder them up. When you get done, you heat shrink them, pull the ends together and combine them into one, and you get a nice little package that is easy to wire, because you've got one wire coming in, one wire going out again. So in effect, now you have 6 caps where you just have one. Next one, and then that goes into the circuit. So instead of having the cap go from here, it's a little bit different. This is all online. This is a drummer that did this, so you know it's easy. Anyone can do it. But you bring it here, it shunts to the chosen capacitance and then to the middle. And what you get there, next. Oh, this is the image credit. I think we're ready to do the demo.
Well, just to show with the different pots, and I'll put, let's see, I'll find the center detent so we have all pickups, volume up so we can hear it. I've got the tone cap all the way to 0, so the caps are doing their job, and all the way over to the 10, then the 15, 22, 33, 47, and 68. And you can really hear the difference. And what's really neat is all I did was I set everything and I just changed caps. You can change the cap, you can change the tone pot, you can adjust the pickups in an analog kind of a fashion. It's like you've got infinite tone capacity here, which is why we call it the Tone Monster.
And so when we made one of these for an auction, I took it to buy a case. The guy at the store sat down and just started playing with it while I was picking out the case, and when he came back, he had been just playing with it, and you could really, oh, stole my place. So here we go. And what's really neat is that when you have this thing at the 68 to 10, I mean, it's a pronounced marked difference. And he was sitting there just playing and playing with it while I was doing this, and when I came in, he just went, "This is a tone monster." I went, "Thank you." I now have a name. So that's where that came from. That was from one of the guitar techs, and that our local guitar music store supports our students and do all that. We kind of partner with them. And so this is really neat, and it's pretty easy to do. It really teaches the fine skills of soldering too. So if you've got somebody who's willing to do this, It takes a little bit more time, a little more effort, but you can get a tremendous tonal palette now. And this is about 12 bucks. A blend pot is about 10. So really for 22 bucks and you know, a few pennies for the caps, you can get a tremendous change in tone for somebody who's playing it for real. You know?
I love it. You know, we were just talking, it's like, I bought a Gretsch that has so many knobs on it, I can't even figure out what they all do. But I loved it because it had the capability. He jumps on with his blended telecast in a pot and it sounds so much better than I do all the time. This just simplifies the whole process. It makes it better. It sounds better. I mean, it's cool.
And I think, there we go.
I have a question. The standard kit comes with audio taper pots, volume and tone. But the blend pot was a linear pot,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
And it's a special linear pot because it's flat and then it goes linear.
Yeah.
And then the other one matches that and it's linear and then goes flat.
So, I mean, is there any magic to that? Is there any reason why it's not a blend audio taper pot? Do they exist? Do we know?
I don't know if
Okay.
they exist.
Smarter people made that decision
Fair enough.
and we're gonna live with it. We
Okay.
don't know, but it sounds good. It makes sense to really have them kind of just linear anyway. When I was looking, when I first thought about it, I just thought it was just a linear pot, and it just kind of met in the middle. And that was, of course, wrong. Tim explained that to me. And I have to say, I appreciate Tim doing this. Tim and I didn't know each other until last year. So this is about our 1 year anniversary. And we, I let him play my drum. But the interesting thing about this is that when he started talking about his humbuckers and tone and things like that, that got me thinking. And I think this is one of the most powerful aspects of what we're doing here with this community of practice is, you know, me playing off of him playing off of me, and using each other's ideas.
Billy, you guys met at the summit this time.
We met at the summit last year, yeah.
Yeah, he
So-
saved my life. Remember that? Yeah, I ended up with 2
I had
DVTs
a car, that's what it was, and I didn't have a flight